So, Dr. Ferguson, why is it you think a lot of the green energy proposals we've seen so far have not really been all that effective?
Well, it's a little bit like economic planning through the ages. If the US government, or for that matter, the European Union, mandates a transition to so-called renewables without thinking through the unintended consequences of that kind of central planning, you get what we've seen in the last 2 years. You could call it greenflation, where prices have soared. In practice, putting a price on carbon is not something that consumers were ready for. So even before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, you could see some of the problems playing out. It's very hard to get to so-called net zero. In truth, the world continues to need hydrocarbons, and cutting down the supply of hydrocarbons is just a recipe for higher energy prices. That's not politically sustainable in democracies. So you can see why this enterprise has run into trouble, and I think that was predictable.
Do you think that the problem is the specific goal, or is it that idea, as Hayek wrote about, that you just can't centrally plan something like that as government?
Well, I think the solutions to the problem of climate change or global warming, which I certainly don't deny, will come from technological innovation. It's technological innovation that's made solar so much more efficient in the last decade or so. The idea that central governments, or for that matter a world government of the sort that some people at Davos dream of, could somehow bring that about, I think is at odds with historical experience. So my sense is that the fears of a climate catastrophe today are a little bit like fears of a population catastrophe back in the 1970s. They're the kind of nightmares of the end of the world that technocrats, educated elites are often drawn towards. My sense is that we will, in fact, gradually transition to more efficient energy. We've been doing that in any case for decades. I mean, if one simply looks at the reductions that have already happened in emissions in Europe and North America, that wasn't because of government mandates. The big problem is still China. If you look at all the increase in carbon dioxide emissions since Greta Thunberg was born, about 2/3 is China, and about 85% of the increase in coal consumption. And nobody here ever has an answer to the question, how do you constrain China? How do you make China honour its pledges? Until there's a good answer to that question, there's clearly not going to be a reduction in global warming.